Hello, I'm Don, a professor of the practice at MIT Sloan and co-founder of CultureX, and I'm joined by my co-founder Charlie. And today we're delighted that we'll be speaking with Manny Maceda, who led Bain and Company as its worldwide managing partner from 2018 through earlier this year. Now, Bain is one of the leading management consulting firms, and they kind of distinguish themselves with a very sharp focus on delivering tangible results for their clients, which include, about 2/3 of the global 500 companies. And between 2018 and 2023, according to Forbes estimate, Bain's revenue increased by about 75%, outstripping its large rivals, including McKinsey. So it's, Bain's performed very well for its clients, very well financially. But the other thing that really got our attention is Bain's culture. So in 2024, Bain was voted the #1 best place to work among large US employers across all industries. In that same year, Bain was also voted, this was on Glassdoor, voted by employees. In that same year, Bain was also voted the best led large US company. So it's, I don't know, I guess it's a bifecta when there are two as opposed to a trifecta, but, both the best place to work and the best led company. By the way, coincided with Manny's leadership. So another reason we're delighted to have to be speaking with Manny today. The theme that really sticks out beyond excellence of the culture and how much employees appreciate it is consistency. So Bain has been voted, again, Glassdoor voted by employees, the best consulting firm to work for 10 years in a row. So consistency over time. The other element of consistency that's very impressive about Bain's culture is that it's consistency across offices. So we did an analysis of 22 large markets where the major consulting firms compete and looked at, in each market, which consulting firm had the highest ranked culture according to employees. 18 of the 22 were Bain. So again, consistency over time, consistency across markets. And in addition to that, what's interesting is not just that the Bain employees love Bain as a place to work, it's that they love it for precisely the reasons that Bain emphasizes in its culture, in its operating principles. So we did an analysis for 33 large consulting firms. This is US data. And we analyzed the free text of about 100,000 Glassdoor reviews. And what we looked at for about 200 topics was how positively employees in those different firms talked about various elements of corporate culture and their employee experience more generally. And what this chart is showing you on the horizontal axis is the percentage of employees who mentioned how supportive an organization is. And why that's important is because one of the key tenets of Bain is this social norm that a Bainie never lets another Bainie fail, that they support one another, that the partners support them, the colleagues support them, the firm as a whole supports them. So we're looking specifically at how employees talk about how supportive the organization is, these consulting firms. And what we see, so the horizontal axis is the percentage of employees who mention supportive in their reviews. And then the vertical axis is how positively they talk about how supportive their environment is. And you see Bain is a real outlier, both in the frequency with which employees talk about how supportive the organization is, and also how positively they talk about it. So it's not just that Bain has a great culture, it has a great culture on specifically what they're focusing in on building, and they're gaining consistency with that culture over time and across offices. So a super interesting company. Manny joined Bain in 1989 after graduating from MIT's Sloan School of Management. Woohoo, yeah, shout out to Sloan. And in his 35 years, has advised CEOs of some of the kind of best known and most successful companies in the world. He was elected worldwide managing partner in 2018. Where he led Bain's transformation to embed more digital and analytics in the sense of data analytics capabilities, and also deepen the firm's existing focus on sustainability. And we are delighted to introduce the leader of one of the world's best cultures, and by the way, one of the best leaders according to employees. So, Manny, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Don, and I'm so honored that you'd have me here, and thank you everybody for logging in and listening in. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining, Manny. So, when you ask Bainies why they typically join the firm, two of the most common reasons are going to be the culture and the colleagues. In a nutshell, what is Bain's culture?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. I think it comes down to a culture that equally prioritizes impact and outcomes for our clients. It's what we call our customers as a professional services B2B company. So it's equally focused on, it's all about delivering to the clients, but you can't deliver to the clients without having a great team. And so to be a team-oriented, client-oriented company, that's the heart of it. And we can go into a lot of depth on what it takes to be a great team. Obviously, a team is made up of individuals, but working together, but working together for the common goal of helping our clients. I'll use our grandiose language sometimes, achieve their full potential. And if those two, and we think those two are quite quite linked, because only with great people can we actually win to deliver the needs of our clients. If you sign up for the Bain culture, you're going to be a great teammate, and you're going to be a great client person, and hopefully that's what everyone signs up for when you join Bain, and you're not just joining Bain, you're committing. All of our everyone in on this call is making a continuous choice to stay at a firm. So it's not just the moment of recruitment. It's continually making us stay. You know, why you're still at MIT or why any of our other guests are at their respective companies. And so that's a little bit the mindset, Charlie.
And Manny, Bain pioneered the Net Promoter Score, which has been, almost universally adopted in trying to assess customer satisfaction. You also use the Employee Net Promoter Score, and very, very data-focused companies. So how do you internally think about and measure the linkage between how employees view the culture and the impact on the clients? How do you kind of convince or communicate to your associates and partners, this is why having a strong culture for employees is so important? Here's the data.
I think it starts. Bain people have this combination of left brain and right brain. They're deeply analytic, but there is an emotion and a relationship component. But it does start with the analysis. That's why we love recruiting at schools like MIT. So there has to be clarity that all of this actually results in outcomes. And part of the reason the Net Promoter Score concept was actually first developed by Bain in the late 90s. For those of you, many of you are familiar with it, the concept that customer loyalty is the single biggest driver of success. And if you can have a customer stay loyal to you, and although you have to earn that loyalty, all the data will show your revenue, your growth will be better, your margins will be better. Keeping customers is much better than continuously acquiring them. So we do measure customer loyalty, and we make that as a core foundational metric in everything from how we develop people, how we reward people. So I'll come back to that. I think that's many companies will have some measure of customer health as part of their reward system and promotion system. The analogous insight is that if you actually believe in customer NPS, this employee NPS matter too. And I think many of you here are in what we call HR human capital, and that even that is a recognition of the importance of this resource. We consider it capital that needs to be replenished, but in our human capital functions, the metric that says employee loyalty is just as important as customer loyalty should be obvious, but it has to be reinforced based on the left brain component on facts and data. So given that, our people are all bought in that loyalty matters. And it's one of the strategic forces in the universe that actually trump scale. And I'll use it in our business school context. Well, Harvard and Wharton are larger than MIT. But if the MIT student or the MIT hirer, the customer sometimes, is more loyal, we can beat Harvard and Wharton. And that's the same story in my industry. The fact that we have two direct competitors who are larger than us. By the way, they've been larger than us since I joined Bain in 1989, when we only had 5 offices in the world. And there were already 3 leading consulting firms at the time. One of them has sort of gone away over the years, Booz Allen, but McKinsey and BCG are still around. So the fact that we have found that one of the few strategic forces that you can actually beat scale with is loyalty. And you say, well, how do you build loyalty? So you have to track it, you have to measure it. So we do create a version of NPS, of Net Promoter Scores, that applies to talent. And openly, we actually do 2 versions of NPS that apply to talent. We have Net Promoter Scores around your team, because often our leaders are responsible for the success of an entire team. And for context, a team for us is usually 5 or 6 people who are pulled together for a specific engagement. But we also have Net Promoter Score for individuals. And so that actually is quite relevant in all the moments of truth in the human capital system. Before you get promoted to the next level, you will be evaluated. How are your employee NPS scores, both teams and as an individual supervisor? And I can tell you, at the biggest moment of truth in the professional development of our leaders, when you become a partner, if you become a partner, and partners at Bain are not quite like tenured professors at schools. I mean, you still have to keep developing as a partner. But the single biggest variant or factor in why someone doesn't get to be promoted to partners, because their team advocacy is not as high as it should be. And then so if you measure it along the way, you reinforce it with rewards, you treat it in your promotions, you celebrate it even in your culture, in the awards that the company gets. We can come back to that. It all reinforces that what we're trying to build is a loyal, talent workforce that's equally focused on developing their people as they are on serving the needs of our customers, our clients. And and that's sort of the magic double loop that we're constantly trying to reinforce in a company like ours.
And that employee loyalty then translates presumably into longer term, stronger relationships with the clients, and more institutional knowledge of the clients that then allows you to, kind of hold on to those clients as well, I'd imagine.
It does. And now whether it's as explicit as that in the measurement, you do measure 2 things, and we'd say some of it might be inherently obvious to some degree, that a client, a CEO, our clients are usually CEOs, CXOs of companies, or investors. Bain also has a very large business consulting to global alternative asset management investors, private equity, etc. So often it's deal partners. Of course, they would rather deal with someone they know. So high turnover doesn't help. It's not good for most industries, especially in ours. Now, you're always balancing knowledge, experience with freshness of bringing in new thinking, new capabilities. So definitely that has very much to be a balancing act. But yes, Don, of course, clients would prefer trusted advisors that know them and are sticking around. And so that's a challenge from the beginning, because most people who will join a company, whether it's us or anybody else on the call, when I came out of MIT, I wasn't signing up that I'm going to join a company for 35 years. That might have been the generational norm in the 50s or the 60s when you're going to General Motors or General Electric. Most of us, come out of MIT saying, "Hey, I'm going to join a company for a couple of years, and then I'll figure out next, or I'll get a real job, or I'll start my own company, or whatever." So that's not really the mindset. And so if you can actually create outcomes that your workforce will stay longer, in extremes like me, stay your whole career, that's truly a source of competitive advantage and a key to a company's success. And I think for everyone in the human capital function, that's probably still the highest aspiration for why do you have a high quality human capital function? To attract, develop, and retain the best talent to stay with your company.
And from a talent attraction perspective, how do you differentiate your value proposition from peers like BCG and McKinsey?
Well, for most companies, Charlie, you start with the value proposition set is very broad. Everybody recruits at MIT or many other schools. Actually, candidly, the number one source. We have a much more diversified talent pool as we've globalized over the years. Interesting enough, they probably hire out of INSEAD more than any other school, because it's so global and being globalized. So I don't know that we necessarily think we're competing specifically with two like competitors. If you're at Coke, are you just recruiting against Pepsi? You're recruiting against a whole lot of companies in different industries. So there is a part of it that you're also trying to differentiate that your industry is different from going to investment banking or private equity or working for corporations or startups, etc. And then you have to, and then you do have pretty direct competition. It's a little bit, again, I'll overuse the MBA analogy. Most people who get an offer from MIT might also get an offer from Harvard or Stanford or Wharton or INSEAD or whoever, right? So yes, the differentiation has to be much more nuanced at the time. Some of it has to be institutional. Do I buy into the mission, values, culture, your term of the company, and is my culture, the Bain culture, materially different that you would turn down the McKinsey culture? And then a lot of it, at the point of making that culture real, has to be manifest in the actual people you interact with, which is why recruiting matters. Which is why, with no indication of any issues against professional recruiters, recruiting is done by the team. It continues to be part of my responsibility as a partner and even as a CEO, say, to get involved in recruiting our the highest potential people as they're coming up, because that's the only way you can actually make culture feel different. I'll over compare to coming out of MIT 35 years ago, when I did have offers from all the major consulting firms, and I happened to choose going to work for the smallest one that gave me an offer, a company called Bain, with 5, actually 6 offices in the world at the time. And you could say, was it the Bain culture? Yeah, sure. The mission statement appealed to me, but it came down to some degree, I probably met a dozen people in the recruitment process, and that would be normal even for someone coming out of business school. If you're coming in at a more senior level, it could be 20 or 25. And if I put a simple, sophisticated matrix, as I did at the time, it says, how many people did I like and bond with in each firm? One firm had a check on every box, on every column. And another firm, had maybe 5 out of 10, and another one had 3 out of 12. And so if the people you see reinforce the culture you glean from presentations or meetings, then that means you can't not have your senior team, your people who embody and manifest our culture, also involved in how you pick people. And that applies at each step. We very rarely outsource training, for example. We'll do on very specific technical skills. But by and large, all of our internal training programs at each level are also done by our leaders. Manager training, partner training, senior partner training, new consultant training. It's done by the team. And by the way, those training programs become important cultural reinforcement because that's an investment that a firm chooses to make, because our training is still done globally, and also and it goes back to maybe one of the data slides Don showed earlier. Well, how do you create a common culture when countries are so different? One simple answer is you got to recruit globally and you got to train globally, because then you have to have global human capital systems, so that if your performance track record, your reviews that you did in the Boston office, when you transfer to the Munich office, or the Tokyo office, they need to be understood, respected, and followed, so that there is a global standard, despite the fact that we all know, country cultures are so dramatically different on many dimensions.
Yeah, no, that is super helpful. And just kind of circling back again, for us, the most impressive aspect of Bain's culture, well, I mean, the excellence, obviously, but is that consistency that you were just referring to across countries and again over time. And that just doesn't happen by accident. And most organizations struggle to get that kind of consistency. And so, and when it does happen, it's, as you're starting to describe here, Manny, a set of mutually reinforcing practices, mechanisms, policies, the training, recruiting, that are all geared towards, reinforcing social norms like a Bainie never lets another Bainie fail. So, could you talk a little bit more about how you view the whole kind of suite of mechanisms or tools that you use to kind of reinforce the culture you're trying to build at Bain, and also how they interact with one another?
Yes, and it's a continuous journey, and so culture is, it's funny. It's we call it capital sometimes. It's something that's continuously being built, but also continuously being replenished. And you could say there's a slight nuance between replenishment and protection. You almost, and that's a debate we have, by the way. So at the extreme is culture. Well, I'll use language we use internal Bain. Is culture a fragile crystal that needs to be protected, because it could easily break? And so all the stuff we do is to protect. Or is culture a diamond that we can use to really strengthen our capabilities in the industry, beat our competition? And so we go back and forth in that. But it's clearly one that we've decided we want to be able to invest. So you say, what is the reinforcing suite? I think to some degree this is, I'll start with strategy, which is how, if we were a client, and one of the perks I felt of having a chance to do the managing partner job, which is a very different job from my main job for 30 years, is serving clients. But then I just thought of, hey, Bain is a client, and then now I have this perk where I'm the CEO. I can actually implement a lot of the ideas. So it starts with, there is a strategy. We'll come back to that. That's not the point of today. There is a mission, and it's a mission that I had articulated in Charlie's first question. It was actually written over almost 40 years ago, to create such high levels of value together with our clients that we set new standards of excellence in our respective industries. That's the Bain mission statement. Every Bainie understands that. And there's some key words there. It's about clients together with them, and it's new standards of excellence. It's not necessarily more money for them, more money for us. So if you start with the suite, you ask the suite, the foundational is to have clarity of mission and clarity of strategy, continuously replenishing strategy to achieve that mission. And then what are some of the elements involved? Well, most companies try to articulate their culture in words that everyone recognizes and people behave. I have a client who told us, well, what is culture? Culture is the multiplication of values times behavior. So you have to articulate your values, and everyone has to behave against those values. And if people are behaving against those values consistently, then you have a firm culture. So what are the values? So maybe that's part of the suite. Articulate the values. And so we've had multiple attempts to do that. And then probably early in my tenure, given, and I'll digress here a little bit, as the firm went from 5 offices to now something like 68 offices around the world, as the firm went from recruiting from like 5 schools to many, many schools, as the firm went from hiring mostly MBAs to now data scientists and advanced analytics engineers and corporate functions. We have finance, we have HR. We're now a global firm, and we've actually more than doubled since 2018. So that 75% growth is actually underreported as a private firm. And then we started acquiring companies. So it's one thing to grow to have a culture when everybody came from a few schools and we all had common experiences to, we've done 24 transactions under my tenure, 17 acquisitions, 7 minority investments to deepen a partnership with a third-party firm. So I would say over the last decade, the challenge of keeping a common culture was literally much more than just, can it be common between the US, Germany, Korea, Japan, etc.? Can it be common with consulting to corporates versus consulting to private equity investors versus pro bono consulting to nonprofits? Can it be common if you grew up in Bain versus you're part of a company that was acquired and integrated into Bain? So you have all of these challenges, which is why the suite of tools idea, and I'd encourage this for anybody who's thinking about either building or reinforcing a culture. What are the suite of tools? Well, after strategy and mission, a common set of what some might call values, we call it operating principles. So about 2019, perhaps it was before COVID, we actually went through a global process to recommit to a set of operating principles that define how Bainies work with each other. So that's an important tool. And for us, there's 5. The acronym I use is TRADA, True North, do the right thing. Results, it's what Bill Bain originally started in 1973, wanted a firm that was about results, not reports. At cause, and they're longer words, but these are the key words. At cause, meaning that's being proactive. Be the cause of things, not the effect of things. No, don't be at effect, be at cause. Diverse teams, one Bain is D. So, and then A, you mentioned it earlier, a Bainie never lets another Bainie fail. And if you look at those 5, some of them are directed for what we do with clients, some of it's what's directed what we do with each other. It I guess explicitly understands we have a firm that we want the culture to be common around the world. It has room for differences. Diverse teams, one Bain is what D means. And diversity is so multifaceted now on what does that mean, and some of it is obvious: race, gender, age, etc. But it's also an MBA versus a data scientist, a frontline consulting person versus someone who's in the back office. So I would say the first tool was a common language that any part of Bain, these operating principles apply to me. And they don't apply to me, just apply to me. I am responsible. I'm a custodian. If I think my supervisor is not, I can actually, under using the operating principle, raise a dialogue that understand, is this consistent with our values? So I think that's number one. Number two is then having the systems to reinforce that, from recruiting to compensation to promotion. And so to actually make the investment in a common global human capital system on how people get evaluated, which has metrics that we've talked about earlier. Employee NPS, either at the supervisor level or at the team level. Major moments of truth. How are people actually rewarded? And most partners at our firm at the highest level understand that obviously your commercial outcomes will drive your rewards. That's true. But there is a huge impact that how you do as on teams, and literally there is a not to get too over detailed on proprietary stuff. There is a multiplier dial on your comp that is literally based on how well you do on your team, and it could go to 1.x or it could go much less than 1.0, because it goes both ways. It has to be zero sum implicitly. If anyone plays with the dial, that means net. Somebody goes up, somebody else will go down. So the compensation system has to do it. I view that as part of the toolkit. And I'd say the informal recognition matters. Bain doesn't have many awards. We only have 3 really global awards that we do, and so they are cherished in our company. One of them, it's called the Bright Dix Award, was named for 2 of our leaders who died many years ago in the Panam Lockerbie crash over Scotland in the early 90s. And they were both good people leaders. So every year, globally, 1 or 2 people get named the Bright Dix Award winner. And it's an emotional ceremony. The families of those 2, Nicholas and Peter, still show up. The kids are now, they're grandkids now. But it's all about who has demonstrated the culture of training and helping others. So that's one. Another one is apprenticeship. That's the award given to some of our most senior people. It's not the best sales guy. It's not the highest revenue. It's who has been the best master of the craft, is what that award's called. And it's defined by apprenticeship to get to client outcomes. And then the third one is intellectual property, which has some. So yeah. So another part of the suite is what you what you award. And then the last, which we've also mentioned, is training. And so you could say every company trains. Every company trains. MIT does a lot of training program. Some of the people in this call are in this call because their company's investing in training for MIT. So the way culture is reinforced by training for us is 2 very explicit investment decisions. Training is global. That means cost. By the way, these are now trade-offs. We measure our carbon footprint in a sustainable world. So to have people from all over the world fly somewhere to be trained with each other is a trade-off. Is that literally culture versus carbon? And then the second is, pretty much the vast majority of our training programs is done by our own people. So to take any of our partners off the client playing field for a week at a time, because you're going to train the new managers or the new consultants or the new partners. And training continues, by the way. We have senior partner training. We have experienced senior partner training, which is, it's funny what the topics are when these are all partners in their 50s by then. Often it's things like path to retirement, etc. But the fact that all of the training, so that's probably a sense of some of the suite of things, from statements of values to compensation to promotion systems to training systems to informal reinforcement like awards, as well as obviously there's reinforcements the other way, which is you are not great at developing people, so you don't get promoted. So hopefully that's useful to the group, that you can pick and choose which of that is consistent with what the mission and objectives for human capital in your company are. And obviously, human capital matters to every company. It just matters so much to us because, unlike, because our product is us. I'm not selling a car or a phone or a shoe. You're selling the people of Bain to solve a company's problem. So it is our capital. It is our operations, and so the way we, I like the way that we think about this is very similar to how some of my tech clients here in the Bay Area think about software developers and engineering, or how companies in more creative content industries think about that part. It's just it's the core of what the company does.
That's so fascinating and also so resonant with what we've been hearing from other leaders of fantastic cultures, to treat it as something of an operating system. Would you say that that's kind of how Bain thinks of it as well?
Yeah, I think that's right, Charlie. It's an operating system. It's the Bain leadership system. It's sometimes we'll use the term operating system as the control system for the business, and then it then integrates with the actual operating model of how you organize the company. And it actually, this is a sidebar that might be relevant. The strength of the operating system actually allows you more optionality in how you actually run and structure the company. So, an example is matrices are a very complex organizational model. The theory of them is good. The actual implementation of them is hard. I have many clients say, this business would be a lot simpler if we just had a business unit, say, defined by geography or product, and we run the company through accountable, P&Ls. We run a four-dimensional matrix as a firm, and there's some. By the way, a lot of my partners say, well, we're way too complex. Why should just because you can doesn't mean you should. But when you decide to run a company with a matrix with two vectors, and let's say I'll follow our history, Charlie. We started with a geography-based business. When I joined the firm, I joined the San Francisco office, and there was a Boston office, and there's a London office, and there's a Paris office. Very simple. Each office, each geography had its own values, had its own clients. And then you started building a matrix of geographies versus industry verticals, go to market, because that's how expertise is best built in multi. You have a banking vector, you have a banking vertical, you have a consumer products, a retail, a healthcare, et cetera. And then we started clarifying our product lines were different. Well, it's not just strategy, it's operations, it's organization, it's M&A, it's capital structure. And then you have functions, because suddenly you're a real firm. So wow, we now have a CFO, a CHRO, a CMO, even a chief operating officer, which is a very controversial thing when I chose to do that inside Bain. Because say, why you're having a COO? That should be your job. And then obviously all in service of the actual unit of work is clients. So you could argue it's a four-dimensional matrix supporting. So as we kept adding that and saying the balance, to have an operating system that allows the more vectors in a matrix you have, the more complicated you make an organization, the more it challenges the natural human behavior to act in a silo, because it's simpler, because it's my values, it's who I interact with. And one of the interesting benefits of having a strong operating system, to use a term that is a consistent set of values and cultures, you actually have a shot at pulling a matrix organization off. that a Bainie never lets another Bainie fail will be true, whether you're someone in the Boston office supporting someone in a different office or in a different practice or in a different product or in a different function. And I think that allows more optionality in and then I go back to, well, why does that matter? Well, because it turns out, I go back to our first strategic conversation, when you're competing with companies larger than you and they bring the benefit of scale, you know, it's there's actually a nuance on how you compete against scale by loyalty, but some of it is you can't avoid some of the things that scale actually helps. You know, expertise, for example, is easier built if you have more reps in a specific function or industry. But if you can balance vertical expertise with better horizontal multi-vector matrix integration, then yes, you can suddenly have a much better value proposition against larger competition, and that's how we've played out. You know, our operating system, I think, allows us to run a more complicated operating model than most.
Terrific. So now what we'd like to do is open it up to our Culture Champion Roundtable members to see if anybody has questions. And Charlie, are you able to switch this so we can see who might have their hand, or you can just jump right in and ask your question? Quieter than I expected this morning. Okay, that's fine. Well, while folks are crafting their questions, let me pose one, Manny, which is, you know, you're in a unique position not only of advising clients, and as you said, you know, Bain was your client, and you could, you know, you're kind of advising Bain as well, but it goes the other way, right? I mean, people must look at Bain and say, wow, how do you do that with your culture? And how can we do this in our culture if we're, you know, a hedge fund or an industrial company or a not-for-profit, you know, very different strategy, very different industry. What advice have you found consistently most helpful to executives who are trying to strengthen their culture or use culture like you're doing to manage, you know, lots of companies have matrices, for instance. Lots of companies really want to build their human capital. So there may be joint objectives, even if they're very different settings. Like what advice that from what you've learned at Bain is most helpful to your clients?
Well, thank you. And I'll start, though, Donald, by saying I have found it's incredibly valuable to me that we can have these dialogues with our clients, because we learn from each other. And it's actually been freeing that I'll often have, because I'll be able to have and encourage all of you, you know, you're in roundtables like this, you can talk to peers in other companies. And it's been fun for me to talk to many clients of Bain, some of whom I didn't know until I got into this process, as peers, because then we're just comparing notes, and you know, all of us have simulation, and there's been a high level of interest, not just in Bain from a cultural standpoint, because of, you know, recognition that we get, but also because some of them have just seen how much our product evolved over the last few years. And so, you know, I had one big bank client ask me to actually make a presentation to their entire leadership at the bank. They said, Manny, we saw the stuff coming out of the kitchen is so different, and I want you to come in here and tell me what exactly happened in the kitchen. You know, how did you get from the Bain that we used to work with in 2016 to the Bain that you're working with in 2024? So there's been interest. So I'd say, you know, what I've shared is that there's, you know, we all have very different approaches or very different positioning of where does the human capital strategy reside relative to the overall strategy of the firm. So it does start with that, and so, but I've encouraged them that to actually build sustainable competitive advantage based on people is something that can apply. but you have to be thoughtful about it and be direct. So where is it apply, for the whole company? Back to down to your question and your set of tools. Is it about or do you apply it to just different parts of the company or the workforce? That actually matters on how you get started. So that's a pretty meaningful theme. Some things are just harder to take on. Changing reward systems, changing compensation systems, can be done at key moments in time. When a company gets acquired is a key moment in time, for example, when a company is in the turnaround. But for many, you can. So what I've learned, by the way, even at Bain, there were things I could take on within the. So I'll call this the Z-axis of a change agenda. The X is everything we can do, the full suite. Y is how deep we go in each. The Z is the sequencing. What can you do if you're taking on an agenda now to have a sense that this is a 2024 issue, the last 3 months of the year. This is something we probably can't take on till 2026 because there's other requirements that have to be put in place before we can take that on. So the discipline and most of our clients want to get stuff done really, really fast. So I do think that those are the kinds of things that change. And then some of it is just personal empathy. It's hard. It takes a while. You can't do one of the lessons I've shared now, and we can look at all of this with the aftermath of, hey, it's all worked. You're continuing to get awards, et cetera. But as you go through the process, the pace of change adoption, is just very much that's why the Z-axis can take longer. I share one of my personal lessons is I now have a 20-60-20 rule, which is very different from when I joined, which is if I can get 60% of the organization behind me, and as long as the ones who think I'm doing too much and the ones who think I'm doing too little are roughly balanced, 20% on either side, that's a win. That's a very high level of alignment compared to if I entered this job in year one, I would have aspired for 80 or 90, right? And sometimes it's much more tactical, practical things like that. But it's very much a two-way street because having the chance to see and observe how there's a lot of great companies out there that have built their culture. And some of them have, frankly, much better business models than us. So, I'll give you a good example. I've done a lot of work over the years with technology, with software companies. Well, it turns out with software companies, you can have customer loyalty built into the business model, right? You have recurring revenues, you have an annual subscription, you have SaaS seat licenses. I have to do this because it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's not far from the truth. I don't have much revenues booked for 2025. And so compared to other businesses, loyalty really, really, really matters because it's not structured financially. It's structured based on relationships that don't have a firm commitment with them. So, these are some of the things that come up. But in the end, what they really want to know is not just what it is, but how did you get there? And we're simplifying. Some of this played out over the last 30 years because while Bain is 51 years old, we were founded in 1973. Today's Bain was really started in 1991 after I joined the firm. We went through a total restructuring of the company, actually led by now Senator Mitt Romney at the time. And so much of what we are today is anchored in what was built in the early 90s. And we've talked a lot about what I've tried to reinforce the last 7 years, but but this has played out over multiple years too.
And as we head towards the home stretch, man, I just invite you to reflect on your tenure. So, Bain is it's a great. You kind of bring us back to the beginning, to the when Bain was in a century formulated, um, and the evolution of Bain. Over your career, the 35 years, and then especially this period as as the CEO of Bain, like what have you learned? What struck you the most? What have been the big points that you've taken away? Or what struck you the most, surprised you the most, been the biggest aha moments in terms of the culture of Bain? And I know that's a hard question, but
What the early part of my career at Bain, I may not have appreciated it, that we were actually evolving. Um, you know, I'll make two things that seem to be diametrically opposed, right? That culture and building culture plays out over multiple years and decades. We just asserted that. But there's also moments of truth in a company that really sharpen and forge concepts into reality. I mean, I'd say even the operating principles I mentioned, the term true north was in a speech originally given by Orit Kadish in 1991 when Bain was getting restarted. Results goes back to Bill Bain in 1973 at the founding. So the founding, the restarting. And so, I probably, took that for granted that by the end, we'd have a strong culture. And maybe my lessons in having a chance, and we have a rotational leadership model. I think we have, we also part of, by the way, one of the topics, again, another digression that many of my clients in some other industries want to talk about is succession, the transition from the founders to a sustaining institution, right? Because I say I'm rotating, we call it rotating out of the CEO role because we have a term. So Christoph as Kameni started July 1. The presumption is he'll do 2 terms, totaling 7 years, the next few years, and then part of his job is to build a bench that can be selected. So a lot of that I took for granted. And then I would say in the last 5 years, all the forces in the world coincided through this period we've all lived through, and we could all debate, was this just a different 5 years compared to times in the 70s or the 80s and the 90s. But if I looked at how there were so many arguably moments of truth in the last 5 years, we had to navigate a global pandemic. We shut down from a in-person meeting business to doing meetings like this via Zoom, from all over the world. And suddenly it became okay. Global forces realigned. One of the maybe the single most painful thing I had to do, and because it's just for our culture, it was so hard in the last few years, was to close our Russia office, as a direct artifact of global events. It all the pivots and tailwinds. We never did an acquisition. We've done 17. Embracing the impact of technology, which we've been at. So the fact that we had multiple moments of truth, and it turns out our culture allowed us to navigate those and arguably come out the other side. So it's both a strengthening event sometimes, a sharpening event, a reinforcing event or set of events. And I probably came in with a lack of appreciation that in those moments of truth when they come, that this could be a reinforcer, to keep you strong, to keep you safe. It didn't diminish the fact that there were still hard choices to be made, but then you could navigate. I guess one example, we did close the Russia office, but many of those folks we were able to transfer to other offices and repot them back to, consistency of experience. So you had all of these all of these things that, yes, I thought it's probably harder than I thought when you're the one with the ultimate responsibility for shepherding a decision, but it's also safer, or not safer, it's also more comforting that if you have a set of values and culture, you can actually navigate that. And having been through it now and looking in all of these events, I feel pretty pretty secure that with everything else that it'll get thrown at us, if we keep investing and keeping this culture, it's both a crystal but it's also a diamond. And that's probably something I'm just much more comfortable with now. Hopefully my friend and successor Christoph will have that sentiment too. But it's been a privilege. It's rare now for anyone to stay with the firm a long time and then have the chance to serve the firm in this role. So I've been quite grateful for the chance to do it, and obviously I'm not leaving, but I'm sticking around in a different role. But
All right. Well, in the spirit of grateful, we are so thankful to you, Manny, for taking the time here. This has been really, really, what I've loved about it is the ability to embed in a broader picture around the mission and the strategy and get into the granular details of the mechanisms to, kind of protect the crystal and harness the diamond, to use your language. It's exactly the kind of conversation that our listeners will find helpful. So thank you so much, and best of luck in your new role. That sounds really exciting.
well, thank you, Don. Thank you, Charlie, and anyone who listens to this. I appreciate your time, and if I can be helpful in any way, please just reach out directly.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Manny.